Hello, thank you for joining me. So this is a video that was requested in the comments of one of my videos, and it's something that kind of fell off my plate. So I have to give a shout out and some thanks to the people who reminded me and got me to do this. It started with a comment from Brian Gaudette, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, where he asked if I have stabilization in the camera body, does stabilization in the lens as well mean something? Is it useful? We were specifically talking about the Sigma, I believe 35mm art, which is not a stabilized lens, but I was shooting it with a stabilized A7R III. So did it matter that the lens did not have stabilization? Well, I tried to answer the question in the comments in a way that I thought gave my best understanding at the time, having not done a test. And then it kind of fell off my plate. And I'm very grateful to Odin Lee for coming back and saying, hey, are you going to make that as a video? And it had totally fallen off my plate. So thank you so much for getting back in touch and asking the question. I very much appreciate it. So that's what we're going to answer today. If I have a stabilized camera body with stabilization on, and I shoot with two lenses at the same focal length, and I shoot at varying shutter speeds, does stabilization in the lens make a difference? So I went through a couple different lenses that I thought I might test with and found that the vast majority of prime lenses in the Sony E-mount system, which of course is a stabilized camera body system now, the vast majority of them are not stabilized. The 1.4 Sonys are not stabilized. The Sigma Arts are not stabilized. The 85 Batis, the 85 1.8, the 85 G Master, these are non-stabilized lenses. And so what I decided to end up testing at was a 24-70 f4 stabilized lens, shot at f4, and a 55mm 1.8 Sony, which is non-stabilized prime, shot at f4. I'm going to shoot pictures from a 60th of a second down to a 1/4 of a second. And I'm going to shoot those pictures at one-stop intervals, getting brighter in my shutter speed. And we're going to examine when we would really want that additional stabilization to kick in. So without further ado, let's take a look at it.
In this series, I'm going to be shooting pictures from a 60th of a second to as slow as a 1/2 a second. And I'm going to be shooting first with the 24-70 f4 at f4, and then with the 55 prime shot again at f4. And so I'll be moving the shutter speed, and we're going to be taking a look at the stabilization. The camera body stabilization is left on in all of these photographs. So the only difference will be the stabilization that's not in the second lens. So let's take a look. And by the way, I was holding the camera out away from me a little bit and towards the top shelf. So I was forcing the stabilization to work. I wasn't pulling the camera in and trying to hold it as tightly as possible. I was really forcing it to have to operate. And so here we have the 24-70 shot at a 60th of a second, and it looks just fine. And there we have a 30th of a second. There we have a 15th. There's a little bit of motion blur in here. And notice, by the way, we're zoomed 33% of the way in. With this image, that's actually the whole image right there. So if we're taking a look here, I want to go in a little bit. And yeah, there's 33%. This is going to be useful in a little bit of an examination. And then finally, and by the way, these are all, of course, at 50mm. And here's an 1/8 of a second. We definitely have motion blur here. So at a 15th, I could hand hold it. At 50mm, at an 1/8, I really couldn't. And of course, it's just going to get worse from here. That's a 1/4. That's a 1/2 as soon as that renders in. Yeah, so really blurry there. That's not going to work. And I didn't expect it to. Now let's take a look at the 55mm, and we're good at a 60th, we're good at a 30th, and notice this is the important part. 1/15th of a second, definitely motion blurred. Okay, we're going to come back to the 15th of a second images in a second, but of course it's going to get worse from there. That's an 1/8, that's a 1/4, that's a 1/2. Now, I'm going to find a 15th of a second here and a 15th of a second here. These are both 15th of a second images. We're at 33% zoom in, and this is a noticeable difference. After this point, the 24-70 really does go out of focus, but I would say at a 15th of a second, I have a usable image here. I do not have a usable image here. So, what does the stabilization in a lens buy you in addition to in body stabilization? In my experience here, it is one stop. Because if I then go to here, this is the eighth of a second image. There's no way that I'm going to call that a really usable image. But that eighth of a second, by the way, is still a better eighth of a second than with the 55 millimeter. So it's definitely efficacious. It definitely is helping us out. And so, of course, is the stabilization in the camera body. So that would be my answer to this question. What use is lens-based stabilization for shooting stills in addition to camera-based? One stop worth, especially at least at 50 millimeter. So that's my answer for it for right now, and we'll see what kind of other questions people have about stabilizations and lenses, and I'll do my best to answer them as they come up. Thanks again. And now, back to the studio.
So there we go. I just have to say thank you for getting into the comments and asking me to do an examination and asking me to examine this particular aspect of lenses. I really appreciate that, and it really helps me out in figuring out what things people want to take a look at and what I can examine next. I've got a couple more fun videos planned. I'm about finished with my series on understanding light, the 5 major characteristics of light. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. As always, like and subscribe. It's free. You knew that, and it's so helpful to me. I appreciate it. And if there's something that you want me to take a look at with cameras or lenses or lighting, get in the comments and let me know. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.